Well, I want to say it's easy for us to knock institutions like this, but when you get to see Peter Green play with Santana and you get to see something like that, it really reminds you of what it's about. Not only that, for you people at home watching TV, I'm having dinner with Jeff Beck tonight at my table. Anyway, I was 14 years old when I first heard Rhiannon on the radio in Kennett, Missouri, and that was it for me. I knew what I wanted to be, and while all the other kids were wearing flannelaries and flares, I was wearing platforms, shawls, and a Stevie Nicks shag haircut, which I have the perfect hair for. Some 20 years later, I happened to be playing in a dive in Aspen on New Year's Eve. However, Mick Fleetwood happened to be in the audience, and he came up to me and he said only one thing: "You remind me of Stevie Nicks." And I had made it. No one can dispute the importance of Fleetwood Mac in rock and roll today, a band that's mixed mysticism with blues rock and pop, and it was undeniably rich and real, something forbidden, but at the same time so enticing and powerful that without getting into trouble, we felt like we were a part of something mysterious. It was the sound of the times and the times to come. I recently went to see them play on their reunion tour at the Meadowlands, and it was really as if they'd never left, it was as if they'd never been away. In all my vast experience and my know-it-allness and my jadedness, I found myself experiencing tears and clapping and singing and yelling and crying. I hung on for the ride. What, at a rock concert? Well, they were back, and they were as powerful as the first time I had seen them in Memphis 20 years ago. And they are and were the reason I got into music. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you the history of Fleetwood Mac. It might be a bit like reading from the Old Testament or the Begats. But they were certainly around before their VH1 biography. They were on my radio and my turntable and in 50 million other people's homes at that time. And they became the backdrop for so many people's lives before President Clinton discovered the hope in the lyric "Don't Stop." They were challenging all of us to look at the sensual and mystical and spiritual sides of ourselves without us even knowing it. I think what is most interesting is that in a time in our history where we are all evaluating our own vitality on the planet, that a band that truly went through its own changes personally, creatively, and emotionally has found its way back into our lives in a very prevalent way. They wrote of relationships glorious, crumbling, of believing and of hoping, of despairing and of hurting. They introduced us to the darker sides of our beings without us even knowing it, and we joined the dance. They even taught me, a working musician, an invaluable lesson, that having relationships with your drummer or your guitar player doesn't signal the end of the band. Anyway, as I said, my first introduction to Fleetwood Mac was via the radio when I was 14, and I was in a small town in Missouri, and the only way out really was through radio and magazines. It was much later that I discovered the legacy that was Fleetwood Mac. Their story is indisputably one of the most incredible stories ever told in rock and roll, and it began with the wizardry of a guitar guru named Peter Green. Yes. His union with Fleetwood Mac and shortly thereafter, or with Mick Fleetwood and shortly thereafter John McVie, became a powerhouse to be learned from and reckoned with. I remember being given a copy of Green Man Unleash when I was 19, and I was playing in my own bands. And when I heard it, I kind of wanted to put away the piano, and I wanted to learn how to play the guitar. And then I got turned on to Black Magic Woman and Oh Well, and I wanted to throw in the towel. It was so overpowering. And I suppose actually, though, it was when I heard Man of the World, where this guy is singing so tenderly and urgently that in his having everything, he still wished he had never been born. And I understood how foretelling his words were in the scheme of his future in the band, even after releasing Albatross, having #1 singles, selling more than the Beatles and the Stones in Britain. He was only to walk away from it all and leave his bandmates Fleetwood, McVie, Jerry Miss Spencer, and Danny Kerwin behind to fade into a life of obscurity. Although I would like to say, veering away from my very well-crafted speech that I stayed up very late working on, I saw Peter Green play about 6 or 8 months ago. I had a night off in Amsterdam, and I went to see him in a place called the Paradiso, which is basically an old church in Amsterdam. It's quite breathtaking. But he played there with Cozy Powell and a bunch of other great players, and blew me away. Fleetwood Mac was an important inspiration in my life. We talk about women in rock a lot now. We're in every magazine, we're on the cover of Time, we're on Newsweek, we're in every issue of Rolling Stone, we're infiltrating the planet. But let's talk about women in rock, real women in rock, before they were a phenomenon. Christine McVie and Stevie Nicks are, in my estimation, the first ladies of rock and roll. Christine McVie and Stevie Nicks made it cool. Christine McVie made it cool to be the piano player in the band. She showed me that it's not about being pretty good for a chick. It's about being great. She showed me that a driving rock song could be written on the piano. The first time I heard her sing Spare Me a Little, I was so blown away, and I still have the same reaction to it when I revisit that song today. And then there's Stevie. She was the dark angel that I wanted to be, telling stories and images in a mysterious mixture with her daring poetry. Her words and melodies proved to be an uncanny bridge between the Fleetwood Mac of the Peter Green days and the then Fleetwood Mac. Then you had this rhythm section that was undeniably unstoppable and heavy. When most marriages don't last 5 or 10 years, Mick Fleetwood and John McVie has lasted lifetimes with vitality and without the aid of a marriage counselor. I look to and still look to Lindsey Buckingham for the mastery of making music so exceptionally cinematic, painting the picture, manipulating the listener into experiencing real emotion. Having just gotten into producing myself, I see what an amazing gift it is to be able to see it and get at it. The history of Fleetwood Mac lives within their music, and their songwriting tells of their journey. That music has spoken to each of us, and they continue to affect each generation. We live in a country that has grown up with Fleetwood Mac at our side. How fortunate we are. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the incredible honor of inducting Fleetwood Mac into the Hall of Fame.